those the magic ears that just joined. That's how they do it, I think, 'cause they're just going to Mr. Big Ears towards it.
We can probably give it a couple more minutes before we actually start. See if there's any last minute people showing up.
The last time we gave a 5-minute breather.
Hi Mala, how are you doing? Mala, are you online?
Yes, I am. Hi, Galen.
How's your training coming? Anything happening?
Doing good. We're getting ready to do one in November with the county librarians.
Okay.
And I'm planning a technology seminar in early spring. So I'll let you know more details about what I'm doing with the technology seminar. We may need your input there.
I will be just happy to do that. And also, is Brett going to be part of your conversation this time?
No, Brett, I think, is no longer going to be working with ADE. I think tomorrow is his last day.
Wow.
We'll go around the dance.
And do you know if they've got a replacement for him yet?
Not yet. I don't know that they're even attempting one.
Okay, all right. That was part of my conversation this morning. Okay.
We
have
need to really work on trying to see how e-waste could be done for schools now.
Yes, we'll be following up on that. Okay, I'll turn this back over to Mike again.
Good. Someone just joined online?
Yeah, this is John Reuter, councilman from the town of Tucson. Thank you.
Welcome, John.
Guy Gunther with CenturyLink.
And Jim Sims is here too.
Jim Sims, I'm here representing Ken McMahon.
Yeah, Guy Gunther. Yeah, I can see it.
Hi, Jim.
Sorry I'm a bit late.
Not a problem. I just put a line through your name, and
I beat you to do it. 30 seconds.
Oh, excellent.
You've been resurrected.
So I'm in good company then.
Okay, just for everybody, again, the phone conversation and this whole session is being recorded. So our 4-letter words should be kept at a minimum.
Darn.
Pshaw.
good. Well, I guess we should probably go ahead and jump in and get started. So this is the first meeting of this particular task group, the broadband provider issues and universal availability issues. As we have done in the other task groups, I'd like to just take a few minutes and go through some of the logistics and structural things that we would like to get to happen with the task groups. The first is that Asset does not have sufficient staff resources to manage the logistics of each of these task groups. Okay, good. He's putting me online with what I need to do in order.
People don't know who everybody
we
is.
We should go around and introduce everybody in this particular group, including the people that are online. So can we start with you, Jim?
Sure. Jim Sims, I'm the Arizona sales manager for large accounts, and I'm also on the council. So I'm sitting in for Ken McMahon, who is the VPGM of Phoenix Metro.
Great. Of CenturyLink.
Of CenturyLink. Thank you.
I'm Guy Gunther, also with CenturyLink. I'm the Vice President General Manager of Outstate. So I'm based in Tucson, and I have responsibility for the north part of Arizona, basically all parts north of Phoenix, and then all of southern Arizona and Yuma. So basically everything but Phoenix Metro. Yeah.
I'm Emerson Yearwood with Cable One, and my title is Assistant General Counsel for Regulatory Affairs, and that includes things like E-rate.
Great. Mike Golden with Asset, Director of the Arizona Broadband Project.
Jeff Crane, Project Manager on the project.
Eric Thomas, Project Manager on the project.
Nolan Straube, Out of the Box Solutions, telecommunications consulting firm. I also am part of the Arizona Broadband Project Mapping Committee.
I'm Galen Updike, I'm the telecommunication, or I'm now the broadband development manager for Asset. It was changed from telecommunications, and
It's all broadband now. There is no telecommunications.
Yeah, it's all broadband, and so I work with Mike as my boss.
Can we go through the people that are on the phone?
Go ahead, Mala.
Mala from the State Library, Arizona State Library. I look after E-rate and some of the technology requirements for the library.
John Reuter, town of Tucson, we're seeking to bring more broadband to Tucson and the national park here to our residents and visitors to the Grand Canyon.
Great.
Thank you for pronouncing that correctly. I've been calling it Tusayan.
I'm trying to get our Mayor Brian in the habit of that too.
Interesting.
I believe he's participating also, did I hear?
Who?
Greg Bryan, is he on the phone? I thought he came in.
I haven't heard that name
I don't
yet,
see him
but
on.
if Eric, if you're on the phone, can you introduce yourself?
Greg Bryan.
Greg?
Perhaps he hasn't checked in. Okay, then I'll get his full representative today.
Somebody's standing in for
And I'm hearing that there's Mike Keeling with Keeling Law Offices and Data Site Consortium contractor to the state.
Somebody's standing in for Mike Bernstein.
Yeah, someone's standing in for Mike Bernstein?
Yeah, this is Brad Fader. I'm a partner at Simply Bits, and Mike couldn't make it today and asked me to sit in for him.
Could you, Mike, could you spell your last name, please?
Sure. F as in Frank, E as in Edward, D as in David, E-R.
Thank you.
And is there anyone else online that hasn't introduced themselves yet? Good. It looks like we're done and ready to move on. So jumping back to what I was going to talk about is that Asset does not have the staff resources to be able to manage these individual task groups. And so what we're asking the groups to do is to take responsibility for the logistics aspects of running each of the groups. Asset will provide meeting rooms and the recording equipment to be able to document what comes out of these work groups. But we are asking you to, amongst yourselves, pick someone who can coordinate the meeting times for future meetings. Most of the staff, most of the task groups are using a program like Doodle or Meeting Wizard to actually get votes from members to try to arrive at a consensus for the most important time. So if during this meeting someone is willing to step up and take on that responsibility, it would be great. Also, we say in the guidance document the group needs to have responsibility with someone for taking notes and publishing agendas. Probably note-taking is less important since we are video recording all of the meetings, and we'll make those videos available on the ArizonaBroadband.gov website. But publishing agendas and circulating those by emails would be a useful thing for someone to do. And then if controversial issues arrive within a task group, which could well happen down the road, someone who can coordinate the taking of votes and reporting out on that. And then finally, the reporting out of the consequences of discussions that come out of the groups would be important. The other issue between the groups is that we would hope that over time the groups, although they're dealing with different viewpoints about the same subjects, how to get a state plan together to increase the availability of broadband and the availability of applications making use of that broadband capacity. We would hope that there could, as the groups continue to meet, become some coordination and a common focus, especially on a demonstration project that we could hopefully get funded and get through to be able to demonstrate both some infrastructure capabilities, the infrastructure build-out capabilities and funding methodologies, as well as doing the demonstrations on that infrastructure that involve telehealth applications, education applications, something that has impact on economic development, all of the other various focuses of the task groups. So that will probably mostly happen by the asset staff taking the outputs from the individual groups and then cross-circulating that output so that there can be some consensus beginning to come together. Having said that, I do have some news from Asset to report, which is not particularly wonderful from my perspective. Through various conversations that have occurred already with the governor's staff and with Scott Smith, who is the director in charge of DOA, it looks like they do not have the appetite for putting yet another legislative issue on their plate that they're going to present to the legislature in this cycle. Specifically, actually they're fairly on board with the notion of creating a broadband coordination office, and they are on on board in principle with the two highways concept, but what they are not on board with is providing any kind of a fee-based assessment of internet users as a funding mechanism to pay for any of this kind of rollout of the two highway infrastructure, at least this cycle.
Let me clarify that. That means that it's not going to be part of the governor's agenda that there be this request by the governor's office to go into the legislature for that type of a fee-based situation.
Well, in fact, their counsel to us was specifically, if you have providers who are on board and enthusiastic about this plan, and you have citizens and application providers who are enthusiastic about it, their collective voices are invited to go talk to the legislature directly and to argue for.
So is there an executive order option here, or
There is, and I can't give you much information yet about that, but they have kind of said in passing, the first two items that I talked about could probably be handled just with an executive order.
Okay.
So the big one is, it's looking more and more to them over there like they are going to have to extend the 1% sales tax rather than have it sunset as was originally planned. They don't want to be facing a public saying, we're laying yet another fee on you, because the political heat they're anticipating would just be too great for that. So,
makes sense?
yeah.
So the point is, they will be pushed, no, I can't say that. Certain legislators will be asked to look at the reason for the 1 cent sales tax and be asked to continue it. And that will be part of the leadership decision at the legislature. Right. Everything, by the way, originates with a legislator, as far as legislation is concerned. People find an advocate amongst the legislature to carry a particular interest or bill.
So who is the one that's most interested in this? I guess that's the part of the policy group.
Which legislator?
Yeah.
We're still trying to figure that out, and we could use help collectively from council members and task group members to try to home in on who are likely sponsors and who can. This is me talking now, just as me. Part of my perception is that we still haven't inspired the folks over there with the fundamental importance of this broad in the executive side of things as to how fundamentally important this is to the state and how relatively low cost it is compared to other infrastructures like asphalt highways and that kind of thing. So that's going to be an ongoing thing we'll be doing behind the scenes, but I'm not counting on any kind of like rapid embrace from the executive side. So that means we're kind of on our own for whatever we think we can cause to happen with identifying the appropriate legislators, getting really crisp bills drafted that are, to quote one of the legislative advisors at the governor's office, that are consensus kinds of bills, so that all political stripes could get behind it and see the fundamental value to the state.
So is this task force, or is the policy task force going to be chartered with developing what it does and what it means to the state, or is that something the council is going to take care of?
Well, I think that the work will have to get done in the policy task force, and mostly there. Some of it probably here in this particular group, because provider positions about this are going to become extremely important as well.
Thank you.
And then I'm going to step back and as I'm doing with all of the councils, and let this group begin to generate the discussion. Another thing we've asked the groups too is to work on a mission statement for the task group. It can be simple. It doesn't need to be more than a line or two, or it can be longer if necessary, but there needs to be something that kind of says, this is what this group is committed to doing as a mission.
Now, as a staff, as input, we will do the research on any question that might be raised by this group. We will be continually looking at the national, what the national standards are, and we'll be continually watching what the FCC does, and we'll be offering, shall we say, key pieces of information, especially best practices from other states. And we also will rely on consistency of the overall ideas and plans that have been put together, and because there's a lot of moving pieces that have to work together.
And as this group, is I think well aware, there is the FCC changing rules about the Universal Service Fund. It may be that some portion of that funding can be steered to the purposes of what the council's trying to do, but that's an open question. I mean, we just simply don't know exactly how that's going to come down, and what the members of the council would like to see happen, and the providers.
So is that a policy task force issue?
That's a policy task force issue as well. Yeah, I was thinking.
That's this group's.
Well,
No, that's another, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Policy
this is,
and right-of-ways.
This is providers and universal availability,
Right.
is the way we
Sorry,
cast
that's
this.
correct. So we have the policy one and then we have this one, that's right.
Now, it could turn out that maybe we should merge this group with the policy group. If it starts to look like there's not enough distinction between the two topic areas, there's no need to have an extra task group functioning if they were combined into a single group and addressed both provider issues and policy issues. I think there was a thought when we named these groups that the providers might well want to have discussions that are separate from the council's policy thinking.
When we divvied these up, it was a challenge because you're looking at both infrastructure, technology, politics, and application. Right. That we were trying to take care of in multiple groups. And when you start them all at the chute at the same time, there's overlap. There's a lot of overlap. I would be somewhat concerned about pulling the providers in officially as part of the policy group.
Might
Only
provide the
for
appearance of not
appearance.
enough
Yeah.
independence in the policy.
Correct.
Well, and we do have a representative in the policy
Absolutely.
group out of public policy, which is really important for us from an internal
Yeah.
standpoint to.
And we
make sure have
understand
voice.
that.
Yeah,
We
that's
expect
Mike
that
Lamar,
because
right.
most of the, by the way, and this is the thing in Arizona more so than probably any other state, the private sector provides the footprint of where we are now.
Yeah, ultimately, this is going to get implemented by the private sector, by the providers in the private sector. So if they're not on board, not much will happen.
Right. So I'm sorry, I seem to be taking over this, and I don't mean to. I have one other question.
Sure.
So the focus of this is going to be, and we talked about this, I think, in the council, is the rings beyond the metros, right?
Yes.
Have
Well, let me clarify that.
Okay.
Our general sense out of the council meetings and the other task group meetings that have happened so far is that the providers are especially interested in the creation of this. We're calling it now because we are told we shouldn't call it an authority. Broadband permitting. Broadband infrastructure coordination office. And we want to call it an office instead of an authority because it's just a softer term.
We think the legislature will react, so we preempted ourselves.
We're censoring our own behavior. But on the other hand, it would probably be just as effective. And another key thought there is we think it's important, if there's agreement amongst council members and task group members, that it be an office in something like DOA as opposed to be something that's part of the Corporation Commission, which is a true regulatory body. Because we see broadband as being an unregulated capability and I think there's a lot of agreement that we want to keep it that way. So it would probably be better to do that. So anyway, the office has a lot of energy behind it, creating the office. And then the two highways thing, basically I think where we're at is we'd like to identify one geography somewhere in the state that is just outside a larger community so that we can get connectivity to it, find one segment of road and do a small demonstration of the infrastructure play, putting the conduit in, then having some providers come in, put fiber in that conduit and cell towers for beaming to 2 or 3 communities off of a short segment of road, 10 to 50 miles of roadway. So part of what we're trying to do is to make sure that the demonstration demonstrates the strategic infrastructure model as well as demonstrating key applications like remote school nursing. Perhaps Alan Pitt in the healthcare one is really heavy on trying to get some nursing homes connected up because there's a huge cost-saving model that can be demonstrated. And then, of course, the Department of Education is extremely interested in demonstrating e-learning capabilities in some schools that are not now well connected.
It's K-12, right?
K through 12, right.
And then you had the University of Arizona folks that wanted to do some things too, right?
Yes, yes, and we're open, and I think the council probably should remain open to broadening that to the extent we have funding mechanisms to demonstrate more and more capability, but I think those things will evolve.
And the key is changing the return on investment in a particular rural setting so that whoever is going to utilize these two highways for the price of one, i.e. the conduit or the right-of-way that's going to be designated, and we'll clear the decks for that and work on how that works and so forth. The key is to reduce the return on investment so that, the model, I should say, reduce the barriers to return on investment so that indeed we can in fact extend the footprint or the fiber, at least the middle mile, to in fact change the way that the last mile is going to be taken care of.
Now, we've heard some words come back that people are saying we're not focusing enough on last mile. My humble view is you guys can handle last mile just fine.
Yeah.
The issue is middle mile, and so a place where I think this particular task group might make a significant contribution is developing some economic models based on numbers that you guys probably have and might be willing to share, you and other providers, on what does it cost today to handle the middle mile issue, and how would that come down in cost and improve the return on investment calculation if the conduit was in place.
Well, and that's right in Guy's sweet spot, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly where he lives. So
Just literally
from a
back.
CenturyLink standpoint.
Yeah. So we're not going to let you out of the room.
And by the way,
I'm sure Cable One would be happy to have additional backhaul too, so.
There you go.
and by the way, Cable One, and is NPG part of any of our?
Suddenly.
It's suddenly.
Sunlink, okay.
I believe
I know
there's-
they tried for a federal grant up in the Pine Strawberry area to extend their footprint. They called it middle mile, and the dedicated middle mile, but
So with that preamble, we'll shut up and let you guys talk.
well, do you have enough basis to have?
I don't know.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm not sure looking at all the different.
I guess
committees
first of
that-
all, are there any questions from anyone on the phone or any comments or thoughts about what we just talked about?
This is Mala, and I did mention in the other committee that I was in the education committee, that it is important for all of us to realize that there are libraries in all these areas that have broadband connections, may not be at the speeds at which they wanted, but if we are thinking of doing a demonstration of any kind, we could leverage the fact that there are connections already available in some parts of these communities. And if you want to, in a short time, do some projects, let's leverage something that exists already so that we have something to show at the end of it in a short time.
Yes, but Mala, I think that an important piece of the demonstration we need to do is that new infrastructure that doesn't exist today can get economically put in place and quickly.
Right.
So,
Right.
On the other hand, let me stipulate, we do understand, at least we in Asset understand that libraries are an important part of this whole demonstration and play. So when we say schools, we should always say schools and libraries, but we just don't always do that. So, but know that we're thinking that.
Is there a
Thank you.
timeframe around the pilot project we're kind of looking at or aiming for?
Yeah, and that's a thing I believe this group can also contribute to, is that we're trying to do a quote-unquote pilot project. We were originally talking about doing 4. That got to seem too audacious.
Sure.
And so what we're going to try to do is identify a geographic location in the state that could be considered rural and underserved, but that's near enough to a served community that there is backhaul capacity available that we could connect to fiber that would then be on this newly built conduit to be able to then use the cell tower model to distribute into library, schools, nursing homes if there are any, and other key facilities using point-to-point microwave to get there, to show that the overall cost model for that and the speed with which it can be implemented is very effective. Now, I suspect that if this model were beginning to actually roll out statewide, some providers would elect to run from that highway-based conduit, actually run fiber runs into communities. Others might elect to continue to use point-to-point wireless. But, you know, a mix of those kinds of things in this pilot demonstration, I think, would be very powerful.
And Mike, has there been any progress made on selecting those communities, or what will the process look like?
No, there has been none, and
Okay.
guess what? That's another task that you guys could probably significantly contribute to.
Okay.
You say you guys mean this committee?
Well,
or-
I mean, probably a combination of, actually, it'll be a combination of several of the committees.
Okay.
Because we're gonna be looking at, where could the best e-learning demonstrations happen, which communities along a highway could best demonstrate that, which ones could best demonstrate healthcare, basic changes in healthcare economics through telehealth, and where would the economic development case be made for 2 or 3 rural communities along that highway, where we could really document the economic development impact, and then finally, where are there providers that are willing to play in that demonstration as well?
I can help a little bit with regard, we know where the fiber is in the state. I'll
Is
give you
not.
some
It's
examples.
not, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, is not.
Mhm.
We know that there's no fiber that goes to Page, Arizona. Okay? We know that there's no fiber.
That's too tough a one, though.
But for
Yeah,
the,
that's
for
a
the
big
purpose
right.
of the demonstration, it needs to be something that's feasible.
Okay.
I'll tell you,
And you're-
let me
just-
jump to the back of the book. A lot of people in the other committees have come to say, you know, there's this whole economic development initiative happening in the so-called, the Casa Grande, what's the name of it? The Sun Corridor.
Belt.
The Sun Corridor, where there's expected to be this $1 billion investment in infrastructure coming in there from the Chinese for a large warehouse facility that will, you know, become an exchange point with the railroads and the ports in California and Texas. And Casa Grande is probably a reasonably well-served community, but we suspect that if you go down the road from Casa Grande a little bit to the south, you start to find that there are some smaller communities along that highway that are in fact underserved.
That is right.
And I was gonna get to one real
South
quickly.
and east also.
Coolidge and Florence.
And that would be, for example, Arizona City.
Arizona City.
Yeah.
Okay? And then we have hardly any fiber in southern Mojave County, La Paz County, along that, except in California.
So that's preliminary.
And then, you know, the mayor of Tucson
Well, we
had
do
been,
have-
Yeah, yes, you have
and
a
they've
representative
been kind of
from
recruiting me the
Rankin
last
County.
time they were here, so, and I don't
Yeah.
know what our status is
I
in
would
that
say they'd be
area.
considered
I'd
underserved.
like to speak up for Tucson.
Please do.
Sure, please do.
In Tucson, which actually includes Grand Canyon National Park, we're a mile outside, and really both communities work together. We don't have fiber here, and I believe the nearest fiber is what C-Link has coming up from their backbone over to up to Flag and then over to Williams.
How many miles away is that?
Pardon?
How many miles away is that fiber from you?
That's a long way, my gosh.
It's about 55 miles or so.
That's about right.
Now, within that 55, there is a community, rural, unincorporated, that's called Valley, Arizona. There's a cell tower there. So, I think we'd be an excellent pilot project, except where you mentioned that you would need to be close enough to fiber for the backhaul. If
Right.
you were talking about trying to do the backhaul with, just working off the high capacity or towers, something like that could work well for us. Otherwise, we're talking about fiber for a long ways. But the town itself is prepared to spend money. We budgeted a significant amount to advance a solution for us being underserved. We would like to see within the town, we have a very busy airport here. We have the FAA, we've got the National Park Service, we've got the National Forest Service, CPS, we have schools, private, and hotels, and plus the tourism factor.
What's the airport using for broadband today and the FAA?
Well, the same thing that I am in my office, really. It's off of C-Link, which off the top of Bill Williams, C-Link's sending signals up into the park. I believe it's the Hopi Point Tower, and from there's a very old, small copper that brings it out to out to Tusayan. From there, it's just sent down copper also. So we have very sketchy DSL copper base or ADSL, and there's really no fiber to speak of in the area. We are in the middle of a highway project. The town itself funded for the future several crossings of conduit. Went ahead and did that just based on someday we knew we would like to connect the whole town by fiber. We'd like to get it in fiber to business, fiber to home, if that makes sense versus a wireless solution.
What's the population of the area?
About 2,000 or so, if you count the park and Tusayan. That's year-round, and that's not counting another, 10,000 tourists a day.
That's your count.
Oh, by the way.
Those tourists, I assume, are using smartphones and things like
Oh
that.
yeah, they're using smartphones. We also just, the Forest Service just approved 2 new tower sites. I don't know if those will be going to C-Link or exactly who those will be going to. That's going to create some opportunity. And also there's an opportunity for a tower that actually exists to be utilized with ADOT out at our airport. Our airport is basically owned by the state, has FAA, and it's run by ADOT.
Are the two new towers possibly part of SACNet and GovNet?
That's interesting. You know if the 2 new towers are part of SACNet or GovNet?
You mean gov.net?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't believe so. Some months ago I was speaking with Mr. Berringer, I believe, from gov.net.com, was up here, and we went around and looked at towers. And at that time they were showing what towers were here. I haven't heard any more. I don't know exactly who those are. I could get back with you and let you know.
It would be interesting. You could just email the group with who those towers will belong to, the 2 new ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, the
Yeah, no question.
Tusayan,
Tusayan.
I'm sorry.
TCR.
Tusayan, okay. All right. That's obviously one that is kind of, it's long, it's 50 miles away, it's strategic, it's halfway to Page, by the way. So there are some benefits there, but for this pilot program, I think that let's put them in the mix and see which one comes out. I think that we also have, like I said, over on the western border, we have a limited amount of fiber that runs around in the Mojave Valley area. Comes down 93, or there's some in that area there. In the Mojave Valley, and there's a lot of population there.
Are you talking about, so it would be served out of the closest metro be Yuma?
No, up north, in Mojave Valley.
Oh, north, okay.
It's the
Sure,
frontier
South of
territory.
Kingman, east of
Okay.
Lake Havasu,
Okay.
the road between
Way
Kingman
over
and Lake
northeast,
Havasu.
yeah. Just about. You're
Over the
exiting the
west.
state.
That's mostly frontier territory, if I'm not mistaken.
Northwest.
So Wickiup, everything.
Well,
straight
actually,
through.
it's in the Mojave Valley area. Wickiup
So
is-
going farther?
It's farther to the west. It's along the river, and it extends maybe 30 miles east of the river. There's probably 15 to 20,000 people.
So
living in
Parker, Lake Havasu,
it. Well, it's east of Lake Havasu. It's called Mojave Valley, actually.
the city.
So south of Bullhead, north of Lake Havasu?
Right, and it's actually an unincorporated area.
So
There's
let
3 or
me
4
suggest that
communities.
one of the things that this group might take on is coming up with a selection criteria for where the pilot might be
Yeah.
located.
That's what I was just.
Kind of a grid almost, this point score thing. It meets this criteria, this criteria, this criteria, and this criteria.
Mr. Keeling, are you on the phone? You have a pretty good score sheet for stuff like that out there already built for stuff like this, so.
Yes, I am.
Just so you know, the other, 2 of the other task groups are starting on this from the application side, and maybe the blending of the application side criteria and capability with the provider side for the technology side.
Yeah,
And
so
can
you
you
could be
talk a little
looking-
bit about, I'm sorry, so on the application side, are you talking about for specific verticals like healthcare or education?
Healthcare and
Okay,
education
all right,
specifically.
Okay.
So maybe we can do a gross go, no go, right?
Right.
And come up with a list of goes.
Right.
And then match it
Yeah,
against.
so here's five,
The application.
here's five geographic areas where the infrastructure demonstration might be practical to do.
Right.
And then we lay over the top of that, let's narrow it down now by where the application, demonstrations, because there's the appropriate number of schools, nursing homes, whatever, they
Great.
drive the applications. Yeah, that'd be terrific.
Yeah, and I talked a little bit, I'm
Mike
sorry.
Keeling here, if I might interject. As we've been talking, I've been working on a spreadsheet from the Arizona Education Department, and 71 schools and their universe have not reported having any connectivity. And so what we want to do is to provide that as an overlay, as you mentioned.
And Mike, those 71 schools are where? Are they statewide or are they in a particular area?
I have the names. They're scattered throughout the state, and I have the names of the individual schools. I mean, now I'm in the process of getting the communities that they're located in, their exact address.
So if we could find 3 of those schools that are along a 50-mile stretch of highway,
Yeah.
within
Dirt,
20
and yeah,
miles
on a dirt
of a
stretch of
50-mile
highway, yeah.
stretch of highway.
We can start tomorrow.
That would be.
So by the way, also has a hospital.
Yeah, we definitely have a hospital and a library in Alice.
Some of those areas do have community.
They do.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
it's a
do.
critical access
Yeah.
hospital.
Or even urgent care
Right.
facilities that
Right.
could be used, right?
Yeah.
Some of the stuff I brought up last time, I haven't fully baked this out before, what I'm gonna talk about in session here regarding everybody in the game here regarding the carrier side. Not everybody's gonna be able to play out there. I mean, it could be you folks, it could be Cable One, it could be 1 or 2 providers out there. Going back towards what education's trying to accomplish and the healthcare stuff's trying to accomplish, again, everybody's looking way out there. Coming back to the middle and providing a place for everybody to meet here to be able to get part of a network, if you will. I do this for a living, so basically what I'm trying to do is interconnect everybody together to get access to healthcare applications or education applications in one spot. So that way there's a vested interest from everybody in the carrier world to say, okay, we can play, go back to state, everybody's in the bucket here. We're basically coming together and saying we have this ability to get all the carriers connected to a source of information or application that they can provide in their own communities that currently have, in addition to trying to get to some of these places that are underserved. And like I said, I haven't fully baked it out in my head what it looks like yet, whether it be it's a layer 2 interconnect point or something where we do peering or what.
Let me share a little bit of some of the application discussion that Alan Pitt is driving in the healthcare sessions. He's first of all looking at use cases that have economic, have savings in their economic model that would get the attention of healthcare providers and healthcare payers sufficient to take the pilot and then want to begin to drive moving it further out. And he's kind of focusing on the notion of bundling certain specific healthcare applications in providers' offerings. So for instance, an example he shared with me this morning is it turns out that with the new changes that are going to happen with the Medicare rules, that if a patient leaves a hospital, an elderly patient leaves a hospital and has to return to that hospital in 30 days, it's on the hospital to do the health care for free to get that patient well again. I don't know what happens if the patient dies, but anyway, they have a huge downstream potential cost that they want to avoid. So being able to deal with that patient after he's left the hospital by connecting to him in a nursing home and monitoring and helping him through any wounds or pneumonia or other things that might occur after being dismissed from the hospital, saves transporting that patient back to the hospital, back from the hospital, a whole bunch of cost, a very, very large bill. Now his school nursing thing, he says, also has a use model, but it's less dramatic in terms of the cost savings, but it does have cost savings attached to it as well. And so he's saying, how can we find ways to get the carriers to talk about bundling these services as another service on top of triple play, basically,
Gotcha.
for medical.
So that's great from an application standpoint, right? And,
Right.
and a needs standpoint. And back to your point earlier, in the 90s, John Lucas and I, in my former life, we did something with all the counties, right?
Yeah.
We had all the
Yeah,
counties
exactly.
connected back over here to 19th Avenue in Washington or something, whatever that.
Yeah, it's one of those. I know the county's now at by the Harrison Street downtown now.
Yeah. So to your point, there needs to be something similar to that the state has a landing zone for lack of a
Yeah,
better
lack
term.
of a better term, exactly.
And he's all over Aaron's case and my case to get Access involved in this conversation.
Okay.
Because he sees that the demographic Venn diagrams, if you will, of the kinds of places we might do this demo probably have the same populations of patients that are paid for and served by Access. Now,
Does he have hotspots of that across the state? Does he know where those are?
No, he doesn't know where they are.
This conversation I'm having, me and Alan are having back channel conversations while we're
Okay.
going through this. And we build MPLS networks for a lot of different clinics to do a lot of moving images around, things of that nature. So it's a lot of medical records.
Right.
And that, since we do that for a living, when he started bringing this stuff up, it's kind of like, well, we've done connecting with carriers for, gosh, since I was at ASU, years and years ago. And how the heck is Cable One going to play in something like this if we can't get them back into the hub like you guys were doing back in the '90s to say, okay, now the applications that are available in East Valley are now available in the Cable One territory. You just got to get a port into that network.
Right.
And same thing with education, it just gets closer. The content's getting closer to the endpoint.
Right.
Where some of these schools are struggling right now with applications because it's on the cloud somewhere, and depending on what carrier they have, it can be a bad experience or a good experience.
Well, and a lot of these applications are basically, by definition, two-way video applications.
Right.
So for instance, he's talking about even when a patient's in a nursing home, if that patient has to be 3 hours away from where the family lives, it becomes very important to still have the family be able to connect to that patient in the nursing home rather than making a 3-hour trip or reducing the number of 3-hour trips that have to be made. And there's a lot of knowledge now that family communication really adds to the health of the patient when they're recovering.
And I guess the biggest question we have of all is how do we translate these obviously demand needs
Right.
into a revenue stream to, in fact, either pay for the conduit or help us to, in fact, isolate the right-of-way that could be engineered
Right.
that would be, in fact, set aside
Yeah.
for the pilot.
Well, this is a quantum shift from traditional, right? The way we do it is, it's kind of like we do a demographics and say, hey, should we build into this community because there's going to be, we got a 40% take rate, whatever it is.
Yeah,
Well, you're trying to switch that around and say, if we can figure out how to help the carriers get to that location, then.
If we could reduce your costs.
It's a push
by
button.
40%.
So we need to first fit the right place, right, I think, from this.
I have
That's a good observation.
the Arizona.
That's been floating around for a long time, but it's still pretty.
It's
Pretty-
about,
pretty
it's
decent.
fairly accurate as of
It's basically who owns the fiber.
2007, pretty much.
Is that in our package here?
No.
That map is not in the packet, but it will
Will
make
you
sure.
circulate it?
We can PDF it if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, okay, this is a JPEG that I pulled off of, but what's not,
Sorry for those who can't see it on the phone, it's basically a state map with fiber routes and who owns that fiber or who did own that fiber route.
and basically divided by and you can see, the ILECs in the state have built their fiber out to the edge of their regions.
territory.
Right.
Or their territory, or to the last town in their territory.
Usually it's to the last town in the territory.
Right, and,
Well, that makes sense, right?
Right. Yeah, sure. I mean,
Mike Allen going to Utah.
for example,
Sounds like
there's-
the right thing to do.
does Star Valley now have fiber?
let's just
from
build this fiber out into the middle of the
Payson?
desert.
Road to nowhere.
It may, I can check.
Payson
We've been
would be-
bringing up a lot in Payson.
Yeah, I don't know where it ends, but Star Valley may or may not have.
I can find out.
Okay.
What we would
What I'd like
ask-
to do is, I was just gonna say, we've got our own version of that. And
So
what
you
we
don't
can
have
do
what
is-
the other people have.
Right, but to update your master.
Right, I'd love to have that happen.
That would be great, yeah, and if we can get that from all the providers
Yeah.
that are cooperating with
Right.
this, that would be terrific.
Because there's been a lot of work going on. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I know, I don't have, for example, the
So
new
we get that
cross
review
over
every
here
Sunday
that
from
we.
other-
Right, I
finished
can
that.
see, because I can already tell what color ours is on there, and I can already tell a color.
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
about
this has been
8 years
changed
old.
here, that we
Yeah.
added that, and we actually,
The more you get back to us, the more it'll accurate it'll be for
Yeah.
everybody's use. And as long as you're okay knowing that we'll push it back out to other
Right,
folks.
yeah, no problem. Jim, I'll take that, actually,
Okay.
if you want me to.
Please.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll include that in the way the note goes out.
So who should that go to?
probably this group or me,
Send it, Jeff
To
is.
take-
Jeff,
send it to
send it to Jeff, and then
Well,
Jeff will
actually,
redistribute.
we have a separate, I have my own ability to do Esri software, and I've been producing these. Here, we don't have the land department doing it, this is my set of maps.
That's what he does in his spare time.
That's right. I love doing that, so I mean, I'm not, you know.
probably, my observation is, once we have probably at least one more meeting out of each of the groups, it may be time to pull representatives of each of the groups into a consolidated, pick a pilot location, or recommend a pilot
Because I'm
location.
hearing that the thrust from all of the groups, for different reasons, half of the groups are because of application-driven stuff, the other half are about infrastructure and policy-driven stuff. But at the end of the day, we need to come together with a single pilot plan.
I'm gonna say just two things here. The plan that I'm talking about is a lot cheaper than doing the plan build out somewhere. I mean, it's not saying you couldn't do both in conjunction with one another, but provide both the back end as well as do your build out to some location. What I'm talking about is a rack and a data center with some gear in it. And if I know the providers well enough, I'm sure we get gear.
Well, I know we could do that, but if we don't demonstrate the economic rationale behind the
No question.
the broader
It's gotta be
plan.
survivable.
Right.
Two highways for the price of one is what needs to be demonstrated, because that is of the greatest value. Then what happens at that point is that we start doing the engineering and receiving input as to priorities from the committees. Then we start saying, okay, these are the most likely places where we need to engineer the routes of the conduit.
See, if we did just what you're talking about, we'd probably get some great application demonstrations in the urban and metro areas. Terrific. I mean, we're not saying that they shouldn't get these kinds of
Sure, no,
capabilities.
I'm not saying one or the other. I'm just trying
But
to
we
give
once
you-
again leave the whole rural, infrastructure
So
incomplete.
maybe what we do is a demonstration here for the application piece of it, and then how do we remote that to pick a city?
That's a possibility, yes. Well, in fact, that's actually important in terms of all these
Yeah.
applications, is bringing them back to Phoenix and Tucson and,
Okay.
yeah. So,
Yeah, I don't think we stopped building 302 highways for the price of one thing. We obviously have to figure that out, because we've been talking about middle mile since I started this in '92. So
yeah, no, middle mile has somehow or another got to come to pass.
no question.
And now there's other issues that are related to capacity. And that is because we don't have loops. This stranded infrastructure out there creates its own lack of capacity and ability to pump things through. And so sometimes it's the connecting of, for example, between a Frontier connection and a Quest connection.
Now, that's something I worked on for the 2 years that I was at Enron after they acquired my technology. They wanted to create a market between major carriers where at a wholesale level, bandwidth could be switched as a commodity back and forth between switching centers and the various infrastructure backbones. Enron unfortunately collapsed just as I was getting the agreement from 5 of the major long-distance providers to cooperate in that regard. But nonetheless, that model is still important for the state and for the providers as a way of getting a much more robust, redundant infrastructure statewide.
Well, there is an organization in the industry that has done that.
Yep.
It's the electrical industry.
Yes, exactly.
So I mean, if you look at the APSs and SRPs and the Southern Power, Edison's, pick one city, right? They've had to.
In fact, that's what Enron was modeling on. You know, they were a major driver in causing that to all become commoditized in the electrical distribution industry. And
So we ought to take our learnings from that in some way, right?
Well, I'll give you an example. Another thing, for example, to extend the footprint from Payson over to our friends at what are the little resort towns in there? Either south to Rye, or to east of Star Valley, into Star Valley, and then up 87 there.
So you got Forest Lakes.
Yeah,
and-
Forest Lakes is actually is the end of the line for Frontier.
Right.
And
Okay.
there's no fiber that extends east of Payson as far as I know.
So Heber, Overgard,
Right.
all the way to Sholo even, right?
And just to come back about your point about modeling on the electrical industry, actually the practices to be able to interconnect SONET segments that are owned by different providers and to have SLAs that are absolutely appropriate and kick in at the appropriate moments to create, fully redundant wide area rings, all exist. I mean,
You've done some of that work.
Yeah, we don't have to go.
We have to reinvent the wheel on that
Right,
at all. And that's kind of basically what
We
I'm
just
talking
have to
about
have
again, is doing that same thing.
We have to have the
So,
political will, though, amongst the providers
Content.
to agree that it's important to do, and then figure out how to put a structure together between the providers that allows that to happen.
And it may be as simple as an agreement between, Cable One happens to be you probably have more rural
Sure.
opportunity out there than you have, and so you would have an interest, for example, to do your triple play in a smaller town, and so I don't know where your fiber. I frankly don't know where Cable One's fiber is, and that would be something that would be helpful to understand that, whether you do a lot of leasing on your own or whether you actually have your own builds. I don't know. Probably the former. You probably lease.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
You think it's mostly owned?
Yeah, mostly owned, so you build. I know you did a wonderful thing down in Duncan area that solved the problem they had out there by extending from Morenci or from Clifton over, and you actually extended from Valley Telecom, I think, into the Duncan area.
How does Galen know the names of all these towns? I've only lived here
Well, I don't know.
12 years. And
It's like an encyclopedia.
He has looked at this since the Eagle Project, probably.
And I've driven it too.
He looked at the 228 cities. I think that was the last one.
I would suggest that at least some of what you're discussing, there would be a logical sequencing of what has to be done and in which order.
There you go.
Because,
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise you end up with a boil of the ocean kind of project where it's all good, but you don't move.
No, we have to have this selection process where
Yeah.
we narrow it
Yeah,
down,
that's
narrow
the
it down,
process.
narrow it down, as to where it's practical to do. And we need to be thinking, and this is my other challenge to this group and all of the groups, is each of the groups needs to be thinking about how do we get the message to the appropriate powers that be, both on the private sector side and on the public sector side, about how do we, if there's widespread agreement, and there seems to be emerging widespread agreement that this is a good thing to pursue, what kind of funding model do we come up for it with? Because I want to quote a guy that Galen and I were listening to do a keynote speech at the Rural Telecom Congress meeting. This was a chemist who's going to get a Nobel Prize, I'm convinced, for the work he's doing, but he started his speech saying, a vision without resources is a hallucination. And so we need to figure out how to not have this be a hallucination, but how to actually get funding in steps or incrementally, or however we go about doing it, but get some mechanism that's sustainable and repeatable to be able to pay the bill for getting this to happen.
Well,
And a fundamental argument underneath that is, as far as I can tell, this is the cheapest infrastructure expansion in the history of civilization. I mean, when you compare it to the building of asphalt roads or the electric infrastructure, the railroad infrastructure, I mean, this is incredibly low cost considering the bang for the buck you get
It's
from
even
it.
cheaper than doing a dirt road.
Yeah.
It really is. It's you know.
Well, I mean, the national carrier's been following the railways and gas lines for years, and we've never followed the roads the whole time I've been in the state of Arizona. So it's
And
just
the
been-
reason we haven't is because there's not been this idea that roads, which go to the people, they typically buy single-purpose right-of-way, or, but
Which has been a mistake, of course.
which is
for the
not a
last
mistake,
15, 20 years,
but
nonetheless.
we know that
That's where we
it
are.
belongs to the people.
So-
Yes, there are, there are providers on the policy group, but I would say if there's specific things out of the provider task group that need to go back into what do you need in a policy, that could be part of this group's challenge as well.
Yeah, I agree with that, Eric. I think that this group can, because it's all providers, can basically come up with recommendations to give to the policy group to say, this is what we need policy to support. This is what we recommend can be done both at the pilot level and at the ultimate statewide rollout level that the providers can collectively get behind. And we now need you, the policy group, to formulate the policies that allow that to get implemented.
Just what triggered that thought was the right of way, because that is that people were so vocal about that on the other road.
Right.
The right-of-way and then the permitting process that all of this includes. Sometimes the right-of-way is not as important as the permitting process because permitting is all about time.
Right. Well, it varies from situation to
Yeah.
situation.
I mean, 3.5 years to build from Casa Grande to Gila Bend. I mean, that's ridiculous.
We couldn't get from Bell Road to Shea, it took us 4 years, so. It's in here.
Where?
Bell Road to Shea is a 4-year project in the city of Phoenix. And that was not
actually that, the right-of-way and the permits that would be needed for the pilot project should be an important part of the criteria for that.
Absolutely, and getting the cooperation, you know, from whatever community is involved in that to allow us to specify those permits as a demonstration.
Well, and frankly, I don't know if it's this group or not, but I would go back to those communities and find out if they want to play in advance.
Yeah.
There's no sense in setting something up we got to
Yeah.
fight for.
And we know we have one community online right now that is very interested.
Right.
Yes.
Okay?
But we got to cross national
Yeah.
national forest to get there.
And,
It's a
Well,
challenge.
actually,
There's none.
number one is you have ADOT running all the way up to Tucson.
Yeah, so if,
There's a possibility with
Piggyback.
a co-agreement with APS through their distribution right-of-ways. And also we have our neighbors, the Grand Canyon Railroad, which goes, and that's all privately owned. And that goes from Williams up to the park, just barely east of Tucson.
Looks like you have about,
There's a gas line project coming up that will have right of way that the Park Service is working to put in. So we've got some pretty good options up here as far as right of way. It's a long stretch.
yeah, so one of the key things that I want to make sure we don't forget to continue the discussion on is a fundamental piece of one of the draft bills that we've created is getting this definitional change, definition change for ADOT as to what constitutes transportation. That can be done at the state level without federal blessing, and basically it's just an extension of the meaning of transportation to include the transportation of information along rights of way they already control, as well as the transportation of goods and services.
So is ADOT on board with that?
ADOT is
And-
on-
And that could be an executive order?
ADOT is on board with pursuing that. It's a
it cannot be an
statutory
executive
change.
order.
yeah.
You have to change. you know,
That's
to
one of the
change
statutes.
legislation.
Part of the statutes, okay.
But I don't think that the governor's office, my current reading is that they would be opposed to supporting that
It's no cost.
because it's no cost to them. As long as we had some legislators who came on early and said, we think that change in definition needs to be done, just to support
So
it.
who's the state legislature that supports town, this area where the town of Tucson is?
Yes.
Who is your representative and state senator?
Steve Pierce
for
is one of
Tucson?
them, I hope.
I think that would be the gentleman from Prescott.
Steve Pierce. He just became Senate President.
There you go.
Jeez, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, and who's the ADOT contact? Would that be John Nichols or who? I mean, who's the ADOT contact in reference?
Right now, I think the transportation used to be, or maybe it still is Senator from Lake Havasu.
No, I mean, who is the ADOT person that is
Oh, Floyd
involved
Rorich
with this project at this time?
Floyd Rorich is the deputy director of ADOT. He's on the council and also on on the policy task committee. And he is as a deputy director at ADOT, he is in charge of ADOT policy. Both he and the director John Halikowski are very much in support of whatever they can do that doesn't cost them any money. They keep saying that to get this to happen.
And he helped us redo the draft legislation so that the last version of it passed their muster as far as the assignment of responsibilities.
Right. And the key distinction that Floyd Rorich wanted to make in the relationship of ADOT to these programs is that they are willing to take responsibility for the physical management of the conduit installation and physical maintenance of that and the associated vaults and access points. They want nothing to do with the decisions about which providers can have access to the conduit and how they can use it and what they would pay to recover the cost of it. So
So that's the other office that's going to be created.
exactly, and that will be the new office that will be created.
Okay, so we shouldn't even concern ourselves with that on this task force, right?
On this task force, no, right. But just to give you a general overview of the conversations that are happening. So,
other than
Okay.
it's a component of the legislation.
Mike Keeling, I'd like to go back to the point earlier with regard to getting to the Grand Canyon region is APS.
Yeah.
And they may offer an interesting alternative in these early days
Yep.
as we search out to the fiber routes into the extreme parts of Arizona.
Oh, we have a working relationship with them,
Yeah,
obviously, because we do construction.
is
and
APS,
use
do they
contracts.
provide power to sand?
Yeah,
They
they
do.
That's
provide
it, yes.
power over a large part of northern Arizona, along with, of course, on the reservation, that's NTU, the Navajo Tribal Utility. But yeah, we are served by APS, the Park Service served by APS. So they do have pathways,
Yeah.
and it's worth speaking
Interesting.
with them if there's any potential where right away is needed, working with them.
That's not traditional, like SRP.
They can only speak for themselves, but it's another rock to be overturned.
So Arizona Public Service and SRP are both customers of mine, fortunately.
Uh-huh.
We have joint use trenches agreements with both those companies. Now, they cannot, just like the state can, allow us to use their conduit without an exchange of like for like. So
That's part of their restrictions from ACC.
that's correct. So they have the exact same, they do like for like exchange with SRP to complete their network for the Palo Verde nuclear plant in the West Valley. So they do that, some of that already. We have done that in my former life with them too, and exchanged like for like in downtown Metro. And SRP currently does the same thing for 120 East Van Buren, some in that area.
On the like-for-like concept,
Yeah.
can that be banked? Or does it have to be like-for-like in the exact moment?
So it's got to be like to like, both parties agree. So the banking part of it, I don't know if that's ever been a question.
So it may actually be unequal investments, but if the parties agree that they both need this piece, they just agree.
It's relative value to you, right?
Right. So
A
it's
dime
all-
is worth as
it's all relative.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Obviously, where I was headed, we got a good-sized state, and I
Right.
mean, can you actually build an exchange of like-for-like, where these two guys up here might need to work together, and these two guys,
Well, you
down-
could even
and you have a
trade
third
credits
party.
for
which-
it.
The answer is yes on that. I thought you meant bank for future use.
No, we're talking about banking right of way.
Yeah.
Well, banking like-for-like in order to enable right-of-way, more accurately, but yeah, that's just interesting thought.
Well, I have written something about 3 years ago. I wrote a little document on banking of right of way as being kind of like a land bank or a water bank.
Yeah.
So to the APS point, if APS is the provider in Tucson, apparently they are, and are they building something, upgrading something to Tucson today, or is it already in place?
You mentioned the gas pipeline was going into Tucson. Is that APS that's doing that?
No,
or-
that would be Southwest Gas.
Southwest Gas.
So I believe that would be Southwest, probably, I don't know all the details on that, but it's my understanding there will be entering into a project with the Park Service and perhaps the Park Service concessionaires, the Antares involved. I'm not for sure if that's coming up the ADOT right-of-way or if it's going to come up the Grand Canyon Railroad, the concessionaire there at the park. But APS has existing distribution lines that come up this way and right-of-ways. As to whether or not they'd be willing to share that or work with anyone on that, I can't say, but I think it's worth asking.
It may be that, by the way, that APS doesn't even own the power lines.
Yeah.
Who would own them if they don't?
Then you'd have WAPA.
Who?
WAPA?
Keeling, I'd like to make a comment, and that is that in the like-for-like, just a perfect example, as long as there's route diversity between the Southwest Gas Pipeline and the existing APS, which likely is the case, then they want route diversity. So APS will have a reason to sit down with Southwest Gas and create a like-for-like
Interesting.
relationship. The question then is, can we piggyback on that relationship?
Well, I know in the past we've done agreements with Southwest Gas, Arizona Public Service, and SRP when the valley was exploding and building, where we used what was called joint use trenching. So we've done that for decades, right? That's not new, and I'm sure Cable One has done it and others.
Yeah.
It's just going to have to be the teams from each of the providers that are in the construction crew and
Yeah.
their peer at APS, SRP, and
Right.
Southwest Gas to
Right.
communicate about what's happening to Tucson.
Right.
So, Tucson to where? You gotta get them to sign.
Yeah.
Williams.
Very good.
Well-
That's a great point.
Okay, then what?
Now, what would
Williams
also
has
be
got what? Gotta get
interesting
them to-
there is that along the way to have ramps on and off of the Southwest Gas fiber.
Yeah.
You actually have north of Williams, it's sort of Williams' bedroom, I guess you'd say in a way. You have the Red Lake area that's fairly dense, and then you move on. That's about 10 to 15 miles north. Then you move on up. You have different, subdivisions and communities out along the highway. There you have Valley, you have Howard Mesa Ranch, and then the really area that's not very dense at all is that from about 5 miles north of Valley, then it is just the highway going through the Forest Service. Once it gets to Tucson, then Tucson into the park.
Now, one of the downsides that I see from using gas pipe infrastructure or even high tension utility infrastructure is that the off ramps, if you use, for instance, in the two highways model, we're talking about cell towers along those highways as the mounting points for point to point distribution. Distributing off the middle of a gas pipeline in the middle of nowhere.
No, it's just a joint use trench. We wouldn't
Yeah.
actually be in the pipeline.
Yeah. Well, but I mean,
You need the bulbs in your lighting.
distributing off of a route that's not near communities.
Oh, gotcha.
Is
Sometimes they're great for hot points.
I agree with
depending
They
on what your
distribute
microwave
both of
path
those
looks like.
routes are running parallel. All those routes run basically north-south, parallel, and very close to the ADOT highway, and the communities are centered also on the highway.
Oh, so they are in parallel with the highway. That's okay. That's
Absolutely.
interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
So that's the one area. Now, as we move south, and again, this criteria that this committee appears that would be a high priority for it to do, I think that given, and I'll provide as much information as I possibly can, so that our criteria is as close to possible as to reality in the state. We can come up with a lot of non-based criteria or non.
Yeah, but coming up first with this selection criteria for the geographic locations, I think is absolutely the infrastructure side of the selection criteria.
And does it sound like we have a start on this criteria that Mike on the phone has? Is that something that we can
Well,
begin as a starting point?
I think we should certainly
If we can
consider
see that, yeah.
Tucson, but we should also consider the near Casa Grande,
Arizona
Can you just
City
talk about
area.
the
Right.
Arizona
selection
City
tool?
area.
Right.
And there may be some other areas that, as you guys think about it, will kind of pop out and
He's
be
talking about the
obvious,
tool.
There,
But it's the tool that we need to.
there are two others floating around right now, because education got one and health's got one.
Yeah.
And probably, and again, just independent invention.
What
Same
are-
kind
what
of
are
criteria.
those?
They're both spreadsheets, we just,
Oh,
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, I wasn't referencing Tucson at the moment, I was talking about the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
That it sounds like it's been built that shows where the schools are around the state.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we
The
have
Mike
that-
Keeling
Right,
spreadsheet.
yeah.
right?
Mike's got the data
Right.
for the schools themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually got something. Mike, is that part of the, you got something separate from CAIs that we've already done?
Yes.
Mike Keeling?
Yes, I can share the spreadsheet that I'm working on, and actually we started it through the education task group, and there's no reason for that information not to disseminate through the other task groups, I believe.
And Jeff, you're in the collection?
Yes.
So, can I make sure I get your email as well, because this updated map that I'm gonna get, I'm gonna send it to you, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way,
I'll
with
send-
the
I'll send it to
new
you.
Okay.
E-rate rules, there's a way to fund some of that extension of the last mile, taking a look at those fibers. The sixth order by the FCC changed the way that fiber can be looked at and purchased and so forth.
We're talking about last mile or middle mile fiber?
We're talking about last mile, but the extension of the last mile becomes almost a middle mile project.
Yeah.
So, there might be some, and Ma,
Yes?
now, tell us about the change where fiber was part of the E-rate model now, where you could buy fiber as part of your broadband expansion, given that you have a target in the 6 order?
We can buy fiber as a part of the E-rate program, but we can't get a reimbursement until we light it.
Is that priority one or priority
again,
two schedule?
It depends on how soon we want this demonstration to go forth, to become a reality. So, and then we can adjust it within the next E-rate cycle. We can apply for it within the next E-rate cycle.
And it's priority one, right?
It'll be priority one, yes.
So who would own it? The library then, if they
Yeah,
applied
they
for it?
have to.
Yep.
No, the schools as well.
Yeah,
Schools and libraries would own it.
That's a
They
rare
can
meet
meet some of the.
Yeah,
That's
libraries and schools.
And you can't use it for other things.
So there's also a funding mechanism so that you kind of, I think you could almost figure out a way to bond in front of that and then have the reimbursement take place.
And could the capacity on that fiber that's E-rate funded be leased back to other parties?
Oh, yeah. The other parties, of course, will pay for their own costs for, they will not get a recurring reimbursement as the schools and libraries will get for the utilization.
So there's a financing model
But
here that.
fiber itself can be laid right up to the schools and libraries.
So there may be a financing model.
Well, there's a whole E-rate thing that's interesting to
It's a
explore.
longer extended D-mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From Williams.
I'm putting this in Williams for Med School, way over there.
And is the library,
I don't want to be anywhere near that when that blows up.
Is the library in Tisaya, is it hooked up?
Right.
It is. We have two libraries there. One is the Grand Canyon Community Library, and the other is the Grand Canyon Research Library. The Grand Canyon Community Library is hooked up, but of course the broadband capacity is not anywhere near where it needs to be.
So is Cable One in Valley or Tucson as a provider for television today? No.
D-Link is the provider in Tucson and Grand Canyon.
So CenturyLink is the television provider in Tucson and Valley?
Phone.
Phone. Oh, I was looking for television. Sorry.
No, there is no television here besides satellite
Okay.
and no cable.
And no cable.
That's not.
Yeah.
Now, is there a county agreement in the Tucson is Yavapai or Coconino County?
But if that's the case, we can serve an area like that, that makes the argument for middle mile cost.
A couple of things. Of course, now
It's funding they're getting there.
That's the point, exactly.
outside of that is Coconino County, and when you go to Valley, and that's spelled V-A-L-L-E.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's on the road.
I believe that's not a certificated area as far as phone. I don't believe.
It's not franchised. It's outside of the park, though, right?
Yes, Valley is approximately 28 miles south of the park. Tucson is outside the park entrance, southern entrance.
Is there, and we'd have to find this out, but sometimes counties have franchise agreements for the entire county for cable.
Sure.
And I don't know.
There's never been any cable in Valley. However, in earlier times, there was a cable company that operated in Tucson. At that time, I would almost guess they had some sort of franchise or.
Is that Eagle West?
From the county. They're gone.
Yeah, Eagle West is gone. Yes, I remember. He
They're
went
gone,
back.
right?
Paul went back to prison.
I believe there were some steel bars associated with that deal.
Yeah.
Individeo, it was called Individeo here.
Okay, that rings a bell.
All right.
But there's no infrastructure left really.
All right.
Well, if we're near, I think we kind of decided what sort of needs to be done next. So if we're near wrapping up, I want to come back to the logistics issue and ask if there's anyone on the phone or in the room that's willing to step up and handle the agenda and scheduling chore for this task group.
There's a staff need that we just can't do here.
the way this typically works is everybody steps back and leaves one person standing.
I've seen that movie.
It's still on the Kokanee National Forest.
Well, I would be happy to have my admin help serve that role, because we've got someone we could dedicate to that, and I couldn't do it, but I know
But
she.
you have someone who
I
could.
have someone who could do it, yeah.
That would be delightful.
I'd be happy to.
We have people.
Nominate that person.
I'll have my people talk to you.
Yeah,
Will
that's
there be
right.
any objections for CenturyLink to take on this role by the rest of the group here?
Guy, I will send you the current list of all the members with all their contact
That'd be
information
great.
that you can provide to her.
Because I imagine this isn't the entire list, so yeah, if I
That's
could
pretty
get-
updated.
It's pretty close?
That's pretty
Okay.
close, yeah. But I'll send that to you again.
And so, just general expectations then on that, what's the expectation, how often we want to meet? And
That's for this group to determine. Now, we can share kind of the rate at which other groups are meeting. Can you kind of put some words to that as to how frequently?
Yeah, the, what is it, the policy group? Or, no, the education group is meeting again this week, and they had their first meeting last week.
And that's being driven by the need to try to get
Right.
something done before the current legislative cycle starts. And so there's a lot of urgency in that particular.
Well, and I would imagine, just getting our selection criteria, we would probably want to operate with similar urgency,
Right.
right? Just to get that
Similar
going.
urgency. Now,
Right.
I think the key to what we're going to do is we're gonna find a couple key chairmen, and they probably have some strike alls, or and so what you do is have an advance agreement with the strike all person.
You mean chairman in the legislature?
Chairman of a committee.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, and so that's something we need to work on, because a strike all is about 40% of all legislation comes about through a strike
Probably
all.
more too.
But that's really the policy group that's got to really.
Yeah.
Well, the policy group, but my point is this: your urgency kind of goes away if you have an advance agreement with somebody that you don't have to have a bill in the hopper. We do want to have and I think this group needs to make sure that you also see what the draft bills are.
We should circulate the draft legislation to this group.
Even the draft legislation with regards to Universal Service Fund for Arizona,
Right.
knowing that that is on the back burner, but nevertheless something that.
Well, I mean, to that point, is there an expectation of getting something to this current session, or are we waiting?
If it's
Yeah,
possible.
Yeah,
okay,
if it's
good.
possible, yes, is the answer to that.
And selection criteria and a proposal for the, what we're calling the trial, or?
Yeah, the more concrete we could be, for instance, in the legislative notes that accompany the draft legislation about, we've identified this specific area in Arizona where we can do a demonstration, a pilot, and the pilot will consist of these things.
Yeah.
That would be probably, the more concrete we can make what we propose to the legislature, probably the more likely it is.
I will send the ROW as well, the right-of-way study as well.
Yeah.
To you.
So just general from this group then, and I'm sorry to cut, next week is
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, so the week after Thanksgiving, shoot for,
I won't be here, but you guys obviously go ahead, and I'll be back the following week, so.
Can you,
Yes.
for conference breaks though?
I'll be on a boat in the middle of the Caribbean, so
Probably
I'll
not.
be shot dead by my wife. So. I could get on the phone, but you'd hear some gunshots in the back.
This will be his last one.
This will be my last one.
It'd be a gunshot and a splash.
Actually, that'd be pretty dramatic to listen to.
Yeah, wouldn't it be?
And the next sound we hear is.
It's a good book. You could be a good book.
Yeah, great. Take one for the team is what you're saying?
But it sounds like some useful work could get done if there were
Yeah,
a meeting.
okay.
People have been probing out, and it's either 2 to 3 weeks out is what most are trying to get through.
well, let's shoot for that. As soon as I get the list, I'll send out, try to maybe shoot for the same day and
There
time.
may be a conversation between you folks and Mike.
Yes.
Your legislative guy, or your.
Yeah.
Di Maria.
As to maybe his sense of who would be somebody that you worked with in the past. Now, it changes all the time, especially the.
You're talking about at APSS or what?
No, I'm talking about the legislature.
Oh, gotcha.
I
Okay.
mean, all of the resources need to be looked at, and we're not gonna dictate anything, but again, it's going to be the greater group that's going to provide, including the council members and their constituencies.
In putting it in specific terms, for instance, Superintendent Hubenthal has a real vested interest in getting something like this to happen for his larger education transformation plan. He's got to have bandwidth to lots of schools throughout the state, so he's a huge supporter. He's got specific people in the legislature that he wants to approach and get on board with supporting this. I think, to your point, Michael DeMaria has very specific contacts and legislators that could be communicated with.
And we will certainly give Michael the information about what we're trying to accomplish here.
Right.
But he is probably the best suited
Yeah.
to provide that guidance
Well,
for
yeah,
us.
of course.
Probably so, absolutely. And then on the healthcare side, you know, Alan Pitt and other people
Yeah.
have specific people that they think that they can target. So I think the notion is, though, to get kind of a hopefully somewhat coordinated but collective message. And ATIC, by the way, you know, has been pressing for years to get something to happen on this front. So there's a bunch of people involved in ATIC, both directly and indirectly,
ATC.
and ATC as well. All of them have influence.
Very important.
Is there any representation out here that we need from anybody else?
Yeah, we do.
That's what I was just gonna ask that next. Yeah, I
Well-
guess that would probably come on the master list.
Well, look at your list and see what you think either by name or by company. Are there glaring people missing from this that you can reach out to and say it would be beneficial if you were part of this particular provider group? Because
And if you find those, just forward them to me and I'll get them on the list. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, but I mean, if you've got the relationship, Jeff and I certainly don't, you know, but reach out to them and find out, let them know what we're doing. I mean, you know, we've certainly tried to reach out to lots of folks and people are being added on the fly. But if you see another provider that really should be, or to round things out.
Did we ever contact Frontier?
Frontier has not been contacted directly. They, well, other than just through notification.
Frontier.
He lives in Utah.
Kingman.
But the
That's
other person,
served by the-
an interesting one is the relationship two high was the price of one, and the cell tower thing. Verizon is an obvious.
Yeah, Verizon is kind of
They
missing
have
from the
no
table
one
right
mile
now.
build out in the state of Arizona, as far as I know of. They have to lease everything they do.
Well, the Verizon wireless side of it, Verizon themselves, I don't know if they're in play.
And, you know, well, except that they could become a terrific wholesale customer for you guys, you know, possibly.
And we have
Yeah.
fiber to the end, right?
Right,
That includes the
right.
cell towers
Right.
too, so we've been doing that.
And so a lot of different birds get killed with one stone, you know, if they're playing.
Yeah.
So the point being, that maybe Verizon, as a potential customer of a middle mile provider.
And, you know, maybe Crown Castle should be
Some of those
in
guys,
this
the tower
conversation,
companies should get involved,
yeah,
probably.
or other tower companies.
Is there any APS? Well, I know SRP, Mike was in the first meeting, but I don't know about APS, if anybody was around from APS or not.
No, they weren't there.
They haven't been,
Apps was interviewed and knows of what we're doing in the right-of-way study that Mike Keeling and his group did.
Right.
But they haven't shown up.
Crown
to
Castle would be
participate.
good. We didn't even have them as an interested party.
Yeah, we talked about it on a call a long time ago,
Right.
just, I mean, it's, so many things happen.
So both we and you guys, as we think of people, can see if there's other people who should be invited to participate, who can contribute some
now,
value to the
the
process.
ACC really controls what happens with those utilities. As you brought out, you pointed exactly right at the problem.
Right.
With regard to the use of their right of way. Because they paid for their right of way on the backs of ratepayers.
Exactly.
And so and ACC controls all of that.
And they are responsible for recovering for those ratepayers the
There's
value of
lots
attachments to
of
their.
rules and lots of
Like for like.
regulations
Yeah,
regarding
like for
that.
like. By the way, another statement we should make too before we wrap up is that, to make clear, we as the staff of Asset are not allowed by statute and by law to lobby the legislature. We can lobby the governor's office because we work for them. We can't lobby the legislature. So we have to rely on, we can encourage lobbying.
You can direct us.
We can, can't even really direct.
Call-
but we
call
can-
this
but we
person.
can- yeah,
Lowercase
If I
d.
tap my foot 3 times, that means contact.
Speaking from the third person,
Yeah.
of course.
But,
I've heard that.
Okay.
So,
Well, certainly part of this entire process is to build the buzz and to build the support from a wide variety of constituencies to talk to their legislatures if they think this is something worth supporting.
right.
You know, that, I don't think that's overstating it.
You had a question for Mike Keeling on the phone.
Mike, this is Jeff. There was mention a little bit ago about a rating tool. Did you have that for sort of a decision tree type tool that we can use as to make
Your
this
scoring tool, Mike,
Yeah.
that you, I mean, it's an unbelievable tool, it's just very complex.
Is that something that you would be willing to share with the group?
Absolutely, yes. And the reason why why I'm working on it is for the education task group. And again, it should be available to any
Yeah.
task group is my
Good
perspective.
cross-pollination.
Actually, we may want to just, does it take training to use, or can we just circulate it and people have people expect people
Like,
to be able to?
it's just a spreadsheet, so there's no training required, and I think circulating it is the next step.
Good, good, across all the task groups, that'd be great, yep.
If you could send that to me, Mike, I will get that out to the rest of this group as well as the other ones.
And let me speak just a moment in that regard, Jeff, is that I mentioned there are 71 locations that have not reported having any bandwidth. The only problem is neither do they report having an address. So as we were speaking here, I was going through and identifying addresses for those 71. It'll take me a little longer to get all those, but by late this evening I'll have that and I'll forward it to you at that time.
Wonderful, thank you.
How many of those do you suspect are on reservations in the state?
Well, I just went through several up in the Navajo, and so for example, we've got 6.5 miles south of Birch Springs Chapter Navajo Reservation or the Little Singer Community School. So we're picking up some reservation schools as well, Gabe.
Mike, we have all that, some of that anyway, in the CAI file. Do you have the latest version?
Excellent. That's a quicker way to arrive at a single compilation of all the data. I'm glad to share what I have right now. There's a quicker way to
Now,
accomplish.
are those schools that you're looking at, are those Arizona K-12 schools, or are those also charter and BII schools?
This is a list that we obtained from ADE when we asked for both the districts and the charters, and indeed both are listed.
It is Arizona-based schools. That's a very important distinction, by the way.
It's only Arizona schools.
Okay, so okay, good. We'll get you the other list, Mike, so you can quickly go through the CAI stuff. Then, okay.
Okay.
This is Jeff Crane again for Brad Fader. Are you still on the call?
Yes, I am.
Brad, could you send me your contact information?
Sure.
Do you have my email?
Is it listed on the list that was sent around?
No, but if you've got that, I should be on that. It's just jeffrey.crane@azdoa.gov.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
And Brad, also, as a representative of Cinco de Bits, you have a pretty good knowledge of what's happening in southern Arizona, perhaps, and so, as far as if you've ever tried to do something wholesale, you know what the costs are and so forth, as you guys try to complete your last mile connections, it might be helpful for you to come up with a place or two that you think of it where the extension of middle mile might be helpful.
Yeah, we'd be happy to. I'll discuss that in more depth with Mike when he gets back.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone. Very effective, I think. Now we just got to get some work done.
So I'll get the updated list and I'll help logistically get the next meeting scheduled.
If-
We'll always assume here, right?
Yes, and we'll find a room, just,
It may not be this conference,
But
room,
it'll be
but
this
on
building.
this floor,
Okay,
right?
okay.
or this building.
And the more time we have on that, I mean, there's only a few rooms that actually accommodate a large number of people. So
Okay.
the more advanced time we got, the better.
Yeah.
We may have to push other people.
Well, unless, just as a starting point, I'll go for that week after Thanksgiving and we'll shoot for same day, same time.
Sounds great.
Works. Maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever works.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good. Thank you, everyone. on the
Now,
phone.
feel free to ask if you don't find a room, because we have the Carnegie facility as well as our library at the Capitol building.
Okay.
And we do have some meeting rooms that have the facilities that you might be looking for.
Good, thanks,
Thank you,
Paul.
Paul.
Yeah, that's
We'll do
helpful.
that if we need to. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Just hit this disconnect button there.
What needs to be sanitized, right?
Thanks.
You just click stop.